You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Stanford was picked to finish last in the ACC preseason poll heading into this season. They were picked to finish last, 17th in the conference. But I'm here to tell you that, yes, Syracuse should win this game. They are the favorite. They are at home. That this Cardinal team is more dangerous than you may think. First off, it's an ACC opponent. You can never take an opponent within your own conference for granted. You can't do it. Georgia was the number one team in the country on the road to Kentucky. Granted, it was a road game. Georgia should have mopped Kentucky. And guess what? Kentucky only lost by 1. In fact, you can make an argument they should have won that game. It's within the conference. You can never take them lightly, period. Because at the end of the day, those athletes are under scholarship too. Those athletes are getting NIL money too. They're pretty good. So you can never take them for granted. Now, as far as Stanford specifically and what makes them a dangerous team. First off, let's talk about the quarterback, Ashton Daniels. He is a very mobile quarterback. The third straight mobile quarterback that Syracuse football is facing. They played Parker Navarro from Ohio, who had 40 yards rushing, and they also held Haynes King to under 70 yards rushing, but Haynes King did have 2 touchdowns against Syracuse. They were 2 long runs. This is the third straight time we are playing a mobile quarterback, and trust me, we'll get to it later on in the season. Syracuse is going to face many mobile quarterbacks. So this game right here, though, is no exception to that fact. Daniels against TCU. Again, I do not care about what Stanford did against Cal Poly. Against TCU, Daniels had 87 rushing yards in that game. Obviously a very high total, but it actually is a lot higher than 87. Here's why. He was sacked 4 times. When a quarterback is sacked in college, that counts for negative rushing yards to their stats, even though it shouldn't. In the NFL, it doesn't count to a team's rushing yards or a player's rushing yards. It just goes down to total yards. In college, it's wacky. I've said this before. They have wacky statistics in college. So really, if you take away those 4 sacks, odds are, I haven't done the exact math, but he had over 100 yards rushing pure 100 yards when he ran the football, not when he was sacked. Okay, so he is a very mobile quarterback. Now, in his career, Ashton Daniels, the rushing numbers don't necessarily jump out at you. Last year, he had under 300 rushing yards. The year before, he had under 200 rushing yards. But obviously, he has improved in that category through the first 2 weeks of this season. He's very mobile. He can move outside the pocket, extend plays, but also look for the fact that Stanford will call design run plays for Ashton Daniels. They will. It's on the film against TCU where he'll get the snap and it's a QB draw. Just like it was with Haynes King and also with Parker Navarro from Ohio. This is nothing new for Syracuse, but still, a mobile quarterback, it can be dangerous because, hey, you think you got him, but he can extend the play and then all of a sudden, look out, right? So, Ashton Daniels is dangerous with his legs. Also on Sunday, we talked about his number 1 wide receiver. It's the best player on Stanford, maybe by a mile, honestly. Elic Ayomanor. He is their main NFL prospect. He is legit. All right. And I already gave more detail on Sunday's podcast, but he's big, he's physical, he can run after the catch, and he can take the top off the defense. Basically everything you want in a wide receiver in Elic Ayomanor. So Syracuse's secondary, they're going to have to keep an eye on him. In fact, you might want to bracket him the entire game. For Syracuse, don't let him beat you. He can. Don't let him. Bracket him, make another receiver on Stanford beat you. And finally, what makes Stanford a pretty dangerous team, their run defense is surprisingly really, really good. They have, through 2 weeks, let up under 2.5 yards per carry. Under 2.5 yards per carry through 2 weeks. And I get it. One of those games was against Cal Poly. That's cool. I get it. But if you look at what happened against TCU, TCU only had 3.1 yards per carry in that game. So Stanford's run defense is pretty good. And just for some context, 2.5 yards per carry, that is top 20 in the FBS. Out of 134 teams, top 20 in run defense for Stanford in yards per carry. And in that TCU game, just for more context, Stanford only had 1 sack. So they, for the most part, played exceptional run defense in that game. This is a dangerous team. A dynamic mobile quarterback with an elite number 1 wide receiver and a strong run defense. And we're going to get to the keys of the game tomorrow for Syracuse. But hey, those are good strengths to have if you are a Stanford. And that is why Syracuse really cannot take this team lightly. They can still do good things even though they weren't projected to be a good team. We have to respect this opponent. Yes, again, am I picking Syracuse to win? I am. I think they will win. I'll give a final score prediction later in the week before the game. But it's a conference game. They have some strengths, obviously. They do have some weaknesses, which we'll get to tomorrow and how Syracuse can exploit them. Still got to take them seriously.